Well, all right, so today we are doing grade 7 English adjectives, right? So we're doing adjectives. All right, so before we start with our grade 7 English lesson on adjectives, um can everybody first log into the aplusclasses.ca. So you're logging into aplusclasses.ca. We're going to log in with our username as well as our password. All right, so then we're going to choose the subject of language arts, and then we scroll down to grade 7. All right, so once we have selected the subject of language arts, grade 7, then we're going to scroll down up until we get the chapter of adjectives. And in today's lessons, we are going to identify adjectives, order adjectives, form and use comparative and superlative adjective. And then we are also going to learn about good, better, best, bad, worst, worse, and worst, right? So we're going to also learn how to proper use. That is usually when it comes to comparative and superlative adjectives, like the example good, better, best, bad, worse, and worst. All right, so we're going into our first lesson, which is identify adjectives. All right, so whenever we select to identify adjectives, right, the articles a, an, or the is not an adjective, right? So articles like a, an, or the, it's not it's not an adjective, right? However, an adjective, it is a word that describes or it modifies a noun or a pronoun. So it tells us about the noun, tells us about the pronoun. So it's mainly it describes, right? It modifies, right? It usually tells us what kind, it usually tells us how many, right? That is usually what the adjective does when it comes to modifying or describing the noun or the pronoun. All right, so if we look at the first example, it says the faded brown belt hung over the back of the chair. The faded brown belt hung over the back of the chair. So this is describing the belt, right? And now they are telling us or they are describing the type of belt that hung or was hanging over the back of the chair. So it was a faded brown belt, right? So instead of just saying the brown belt, we are saying it is the faded brown belt, right? And that describes the noun. Robbie carried several books to the attic. Robbie carried several books to the attic, right? And remember, I mentioned that an adjective, it can tell us what kind, it can also tell us how many, right? So in this case, it doesn't say one book, 5 books, 10 books. It says several books, right? Which means that it can be any amount of books um, that Robbie carries, right? So several books. It tells us the amount of books that Robbie carried to the attic. All right, so then if we have words, so within a sentence, if you have words like this, that, those, and these, right? These are adjectives, right? when they modify a noun or a pronoun, right? So once we modify a noun or a pronoun, then we use words like this, that, those, and these. And another word that we call, these adjectives that modifies a noun or pronoun, we call them demonstrative adjectives. So demonstrative adjectives. So demonstrative adjectives, right? It's adjectives that modifies a noun or a pronoun, right? And the words that shows the adjectives, right, that are demonstrative adjectives are this, that, those, and these. All right, so if we look at the example, it says, no, I haven't seen that documentary. So it means that you are demonstrating or you're telling us what documentary, right? So, of course, in this case, we don't know what documentary. However, in conversation, if somebody talks about a specific documentary, you'll be able to say, like, yes, I've seen that, or I haven't seen that documentary, right? So that modifies the noun. These photos are from our trip to Tahiti. These, right? It's a demonstrative adjectives. These and that, right? And they modify a noun or they modify a pronoun, right? An adjective can also appear before or after the word that it modifies. So an adjective can appear before or it can appear after the word that it modifies. So it doesn't necessarily have to say that documentary or these photos that specifically shows that it is mentioning or making mention of or modifying that specific noun or pronoun, right? It can either be before or it can be after the word that it modifies. Pardon. Example, Nell planted the fragile seedlings tenderly. So Nell planted the fragile seedlings tenderly, right? And in this case, it is describing the seedlings, right? So we're saying fragile seedlings. And this is the word that now comes before. But then there's also a word that's, here's another sentence that shows that the word is after it is modified. The seedlings were fragile, right? And it tells us about the seedlings. It was fragile. So you see, here the word is afterwards. So the adjective, which is fragile, it now appears after the word that it modifies. Then we also have adjectives that comes after the word they describe, and we usually and are usually connected by a linking verb, right? So adjectives that come after the word they describe are usually connected by a linking verb. And the linking verb can be like to be, or it can be like to seem, to appear, or to look, right? So adjectives that come after the word that they describe are usually connected by a linking verb. Not always, but most times linking verb. It's connected to a linking verb. Like to be, to seem, to appear, or to look. For example, he seemed eager for the mail to arrive, right? He seemed eager for the mail to arrive. And the word eager. it basically we have the linking verb, which is seemed, right? Or to seem. So seemed. So he seemed eager for the mail to arrive. Seem eager. All right. Okay. Okay, if we look at this word, here it says beautiful. So this is basically just a few words that describes within a sentence, right? Like, for example, Dalton and Michelle recently purchased a beautiful lakefront home on the shore of Lake Michigan. Dalton and Michelle recently purchased a beautiful lakefront home on the shore of Lake Michigan. So we need to identify the adjective, right? So there's basically two adjectives within that sentence. We have beautiful and we have lakefront. So the first word, beautiful, right? It tells us about the home, right? It modifies the home. Or the noun modifies the noun, which is home. And then we have the second adjective, which is lakefront, because we're saying it's a beautiful lakefront, right? And that also modifies the noun, which is home. So, which means that our adjective is beautiful lakefront. So, it's both words, right? Beautiful and lakefront. So, both of that adjectives, the first one as well as the second one, it modifies the noun, which is home. Tells us about the noun. It is a beautiful lakefront home. All right. And remember, just um a tip, not even a tip, but just to remember that you do not select any articles, right? Whenever we need to either identify an adjective within a sentence. So the articles a, an, or the, it is not an adjective, right? All right, look at the next sentence over here. Let me underline it. Oopsie. Underline the sentence. The photograph on the wall captures the jovial atmosphere of the scene perfectly. So the photograph on the wall captures the jovial atmosphere of the scene perfectly, right? So if we were to identify the adjective within that sentence, which is highlighted in yellow, it is jovial, right? It is jovial and it is telling us about the noun, or it modifies the noun, which is atmosphere. It tells us about the atmosphere. It is jovial, right? So the adjective is jovial, which modifies or tells us about the noun atmosphere. Jovial atmosphere. So our adjective is jovial and it modifies our noun, which is adjective, which is atmosphere, sorry. All right, let us go to the next one. All right, let's go look at the sentence. We're looking at the sentence over here. Let me underline it. All right. Eleanor Roosevelt was shy as a child, but as an adult, she was famously outspoken. She was a famously outspoken advocate for the rights of women, children, and the poor. So Eleanor Roosevelt was shy as a child, but as an adult, she was famously outspoken. She was a famously outspoken advocate for the rights of women, children, and the poor. All right, so if we were to identify the adjectives within that sentence, right, then we can then say the adjectives are shy as well as outspoken, right? Because it tells us about the type of person Eleanor is. So, firstly, shy, right? So they first said she was a shy person when she was a child. So shy, right? It basically tells us what type of person Eleanor was when she was a child. But now they're saying she is outspoken, right? So outspoken is the adjective and it modifies or tells us about, let's say, basically about her profession. So she's an outspoken advocate. She's an outspoken advocate, right? And also, like you see, we did not even underline or select any articles within that sentence that shows that it is an adjective. So shy and outspoken, it's the two adjectives within that sentence that modifies the nouns. And the two nouns is Eleanor, which is the person that we are talking about, and outspoken, which tells us about her profession. She's an outspoken advocate. All right, if we go to the next sentence, let us check how they have identified the adjectives within the sentence. Sorry. Although we usually think of a computer as a standalone object, there are also embedded computers inside appliances such as microwaves and dishwashers. So, although we usually think of a computer as a standalone object, there are also embedded computers inside appliances such as microwaves and dishwashers. So, there they have identified and highlighted two um, adjectives within that sentences, which within that sentence, which is standalone, right, which tells us about the noun, which is object, and embedded, which tells us about the noun computers, right? So this is basically telling us that we just see the computer as a computer, right? It being on its own. However, there is basically a computer inside appliances too. And that is why the appliances such as microwaves and dishwashers can do what they are doing. They know when to spin, they know when to wash, they know when to clean. Microwaves know when to fry or warm something, right? Or defrost. So standalone and embedded, it's the two adjectives, right? And the two adjectives within that sentence says it basically the first one standalone, it modifies or tells us about the noun object. And the second adjective, which is embedded, right, it tells us or modifies the noun, which is computers. All right, we're going to look at the last one. The wind the wind howled as it swept through in the yard the trees in the yard. A winter storm was on the way. The wind howled as it swept through the trees in the yard. A winter storm was on the way. So the adjective that was identified within the sentence is winter, right? And winter is the adjective that tells us or modifies the noun storm. So it is a winter storm. So a winter storm is on its way, right? So as much as winter, it is a season that is basically on its own. But now we are basically describing the type of storm. We say it's a winter storm. So usually winter, it's maybe raining or snowing or depending on the type of weather. It is very cold, right? So now that is how we are describing the storm. So a winter storm, a winter storm was on the way. So winter is the adjective that tells us or modifies or describes the noun, which is storm. All right. So if we were to test ourselves, right, on an adjective, sorry, um, And remember, we said an adjective is a word that describes or it modifies a noun or a pronoun. And we get different types of adjectives, right? We have demonstrative adjectives, sorry, and we use words like this, that, those, and these, right? And they modify the noun or pronoun. And then we also have adjectives. And remember, adjectives, it can either appear before or after the word that it modifies, right? Then we have adjectives that comes after the word they describe that they describe. It usually has a linking verb, such as to be or be, to seem or seemed, to appear or to look. All right, so let's go to our test. Begin test. We need to select the one adjective, right, within these two sentences. And remember, we said do not select any articles because a, an, or the is not an adjective, right? It's an article. So it's either we're going to choose the first option, which proper describes or the adjective that modifies a specific noun, right? So we need to select one of the options. The wind howled as it swept through the trees in the yard. A winter storm was on the way. So the adjective identified in the first sentence is winter. Then we have the second option. It says, the wind howled as it swept through the trees in the yard. A winter storm was on its way. So the second option, wind, is identified within that sentence, right? So we need to choose the correct sentence or the correct, let's say, the highlighted word within each sentence that shows that it is an adjective. Is it winter storms or wind, right? All right, so winter storm, because winter storm, winter is the adjective that modifies the noun storm. We need to select one adjective. As we ambled, as we ambled along the moonlit path, we listened to the symphony of crickets in the woods around us. So it's either ambled or as we ambled along the moonlight path, we listened to the symphony of crickets in the woods around us. So the two words that is highlighted within the two sentences is, or the word is ambled, and we also have moonlit, right? So we need to choose one of the words that is an adjective. All right, so we're going to choose moonlit, right? So moonlit is the adjective that modifies the noun path, right? All right, the next one. Dalton and Michelle recently purchased a beautiful lakefront home on the shore of Lake Michigan. Or the second option, Dalton and Michelle recently purchased a beautiful lake house or lakefront home on the shore of Lake Michigan. So the first option or the first sentence, they identified two adjectives, which is beautiful and lakefront. And in the second option, they identified recently and Lake Michigan, right? So we need to say which sentence where they've identified the adjectives is correct. Is it beautiful lakefront or is it recently Lake Michigan? We need to choose two adjectives within that sentence. All right, so we're going to choose option one, right? Which is beautiful lakefront, right? And beautiful lakefront is the adjectives that tells us about how the home or the noun, which is Lake Michigan. Dogs can detect sound at a higher frequency than humans. Therefore, they hear high pitched noises that we can't. So the two words that is identified or highlighted within the first sentence is higher and high pitched. The second one says dogs can detect sound at a higher frequency than humans, therefore, they hear high pitched noises that we can't. And there they identified humans and high pitched. We need to choose the two adjectives within that sentence, right? All right, we're choosing the first one, right? So we chose the first one. So higher is the adjective that tells us about the frequency, and high pitched, it tells us about the noise, right? It modifies that noun. All right, let's go back. So that is identifying adjectives, right? So now let's go to the next one, which is order adjectives. Order adjectives. Adjectives are words that tell us about a noun. Often more than one adjective is used to describe the same noun, right? So yes, you can have more than one adjective that describes one noun. You can say it is a beautiful red dress, right? Which means that you are describing that noun and saying that it is beautiful, but you're also saying it is red, right? So it's telling us about the dress, which is the noun, for example, right? The same year with this example, she gave me long red silk roses, right? So the adjective or adjectives that describe the noun is long red silk, right? And that describes the very same noun, which is roses. So she gave me long red silk roses. That is how this person is describing the roses that they got. It was long, it was red, and it was silky. So the adjectives long, red, and silk, they all describe the noun rose, the very same noun rose or roses. So when more than one adjective is used, the adjectives usually go in a certain order. And this table will show us the order, right, in which your adjectives should go. All right, so this is now your order, right? So whenever you want to describe a noun, right, then there needs to first be an article, if there's an article. So article, opinion, size, shape, age, color, origin, material, purpose or qualifier, and then the noun, right? That is when we describe, or that is when more than one adjective is used to describe a noun, right? And yeah, do you see purpose and qualifier? Here it says race or camping, for example. A purpose or qualifier is often considered part of a noun, right? That is why it's the in front of the noun. When you put a purpose or qualifier with a noun, the result is similar to a compound word. For example, purpose or qualifier, and then thereafter we must have the noun. So if we look at this word over here, There's the purpose of qualifier, and there we have the noun, right? Then if we were to put that words together, then it is like race car, right? What type of car? A race car. The same with the next one. The purpose is or qualifier, which is camping, and the noun is stove, right? Then we say we then need a, or we're taking out camping stove, not the actual stove that we're using at home, for example. All right. So we say that adjectives, it is a word that tells us about the noun, and sometimes or often more than one adjective is used to describe a noun. All right, so if we are going to do a little activity now, right? Or sentences where we are going to put the adjectives in order, right? Or the words we're going to put in order. All right, so yeah, it says a silver bracelet delicate, right? We need to put the words in order, right? So a silver bracelet delicate. So if we look at the, what do we call this table that shows the order, right? We need to specifically look at the order in order to put our, let's say, these words in order of how it needs to be written or described, right? Then, of course, A is the article that will come first, right? So A, you're going to say A. There, do we have an opinion, right? An opinion. There we have, sorry, delicate, right? So we're going to say a delicate, right? And this is the adjective delicate, it gives an opinion, right? So which means that delicate comes second. So a delicate, right? So a is the article, a delicate, right? There we have the next one is silver. So silver. And silver tells us here about the type of material that is used. And then bracelet. We put bracelet at the bottom. Bracelet. So we then have, this is now the order, a delicate silver bracelet. That is if we were to put it now in order based on the table um, that they showed us now within the, of the adjectives, for example. So they say that adjectives, it goes into a certain order, and there we have the specific table that shows us the order in which the adjective needs to go. You first need to show the article, then there needs to be an opinion, then there needs to be a size, a shape, age, color, origin, material. You see, silver can also be material, purpose of qualifier, and then we have the actual noun, right? So which means that we are describing the bracelet, right? It is a delicate silver bracelet. All right, let's go to the next one. Texan vast the ranch. So Texan vast the ranch. We need to put that in order. So we're going to put that in order, right? In order for us to write it, but we need to also look at the table that shows the order. Okay, so Texan was the Raj, right? So now we already know that the is going to come first because the is the article, right? So the is the article, and article it comes first. Then we have Texas, vast, the ranch, right? So after we put the, we're going to say vast. And vast, it tells us about the size, right? It tells us about the size. So vast comes after the article, which is the. Then we have Texan, right? And Texan is the origin, like for example, Italian, Texan, so on. So that comes third. And then we have ranch, which comes last. So the vast Texan ranch. We are now describing this ranch, vast Texan ranch. All right, we're going to do one more. We need to put the words in order, right? Punching the bag huge, right? So we need to choose we need to put the adjectives basically in order. And we said that we first put the article, which is the. So we're going to put the article first, which is the, because here it says in the table that shows order, the comes first because it's the article. The article comes first. Punching the bag huge, right? Then we're going with huge because this shows size, right? So there we have the article, there we have the size. It's huge, right? It's huge. Then we have punching, which is the purpose or qualifier. And then we have bag. So the huge punching bag, right? The huge punching bag. So huge and punching, it tells us about this big bag or tells us about the bag. All right. All right. Let us go to the test to see if we will be able to put the adjectives in order. We need to put the words in order. We have chemistry, experiment, the successful. So is it this successful experiment chemistry or the successful chemistry experiment? We need to put it in order. And of course, it starts with an article, which is the. All right. So, yeah, they are talking about the experiment, right? We're going to go, let's choose the second option, right? Because they are describing the successful chemistry experiment. So, what type of experiment? It was not only successful, but it was a chemistry experiment. Dog, old, frisky, a, right? So, of course, we start with the a, which is an article. So, is it a frisky old dog or a old frisky dog? We need to choose one of the options, right, that best shows or describe the noun, right? And we need to also put it in order. All right, so we're going to say a frisky old dog, right? A tortilla flour flat. A tortilla flour flat? Is it a tortilla flour flat or a flat flour tortilla? We need to choose the correct option that best describes the noun, but also based on the order in which we need to put it. All right, so we're going to choose the second one, right, which describes the tortilla, right? It is flat and flour, right? It's a flat flour tortilla, right? Well done. So if you were able to do that, then well done. All right, so that is identifying adjectives, right? And we also did the order of adjectives. And in the order of adjectives, we were able to see which order based on the table, right? We have to put our adjectives, right? So we cannot just put our adjectives randomly in front of the noun or before the noun. There's a specific order that we need to follow. For example, we need to first put the article. And remember, an article is not an adjective, right? So we first put the article, then either the opinion, the size, the shape, the age, the color, origin, material, the purpose or qualifier, and then we have the noun. So literally between the article and the noun, these are the few things that we need to put in order to show or to describe or modify a noun. And we said adjectives are words that tells us about the noun, it describes the noun or it modifies the noun, right? And often more than one adjective is used to describe the same noun, which is okay. And that is where we put the specific words or adjectives in order, right? That will show or describe a specific noun. All right. And we also identified the adjectives, right? And we also mentioned demonstrative adjectives where we use words like this, that, those, and these. So, grade sevens, that brings us to the end of our lesson on adjectives, all right? In our next lesson, we are going to do form and use comparative and superlative adjectives. And then we're also going to use good, better, best, bad, worse, and worst. And we will basically show or learn um how to put that in order if it's a comparative or a superlative adjective. So thank you very much for joining the class or joining the lesson. And you should have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.